we have a question about the visa bulletin. For those people who don't know about the visa bulletin, can you maybe give a brief explanation of what that is, and then maybe talk about this month's visa bulletin?
Okay, so the Visa Bulletin is a publication from the Department of State. And the Department of State basically says how many immigrant visas can be used in a particular given month. They kind of track them. It's like a mechanism, a counting mechanism to ensure that the limits of how many immigrant visas or green cards are passed out each year stay within the statutory limits. So we're allowed 140,000 per year. Fiscal year, it starts on October 1st, runs through September 30th. For the last several years, we've had more than 140,000 because there's something called a spillover from the family-based side. If family does not use all their allotted green cards or immigrant visas, they carry over to the employment side. And due to COVID, we had a large number of spillovers for the last 2 years. This current year, the spillover was about 48,000. So still a significant number. But the Department of State looks at people get, as Tanya mentioned, people get green cards in two different ways, either through the consulates, through the embassies overseas, or they get them through the U.S. in the USCIS in what's called a 485 or adjustment of status. The Department of State kind of tracks that and says, basically, in simplistic terms, kind of communicates with the USCIS and says, how many did you approve last month? How many's in your queue? And how many are you going to be able to get to? And does the same with the consulates. And so they set the priority date or your spot in the queue in the visa bulletin each month. And right now we have the February bulletin here in a couple of weeks, or maybe even within the next 10 days, we'll get the March's bulletin because it comes out each year or each month in advance. And you have to look for two things. You have to look for what country you were born in, and that's an important distinction. It's not your country of citizenship that counts, it's your country of birth. So you may have been born in India, moved to Canada, became a Canadian citizen. You might be eligible for a TN, but you're not going to be eligible to get counted under the Canadian category. Tanya, if you can put that slide back up for a second again.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, great. So you look at what country you're from, and notice there's 3 countries that have their own kind of quota, their own category: Philippines, India, and China right now. Others can be added as numbers are used. And then everybody else falls into the other category. ROW simply stands for rest of the world, okay? And if you see the word current in your column, that means there's no line for you. There's no queue. You can immediately go through the process as Chris talked about. I-140 approved, NVC processing, going straight for an interview. If, however, you are in a category that's backed up, or what we call retrogressed, for example, India, they're currently working only on people who were filed and have a priority date established with a filing of an I-140 prior to June 15th, 2012, which means, as a practical matter, if you're from India or you're from China, there's not really a viable EB-3 option because the line is too long, where you're fine for Philippines, fine for the rest of the world. Now, we expect to run out of immigrant visas by the end of the fiscal year. That's not a bad thing. That just means they're using them all up, and then we get a new allotment. What we're all concerned about is when the demand exceeds supply, it creates retrogression, and that at some point, likely in the next 12 months, we're going to get some retrogression, potentially for everyone. In other categories, such as the EB-2 category, which would be more like PTs, OTs, certain types of engineers, there's already a cutoff date for the rest of the world as well as other visa countries. So the visa bulletin is extremely important as it relates to the timing of you getting your green card. But right now, everything is clear sailing, and most people expect it to stay that way for the foreseeable future, at least until next year.
Okay, thank you, Mike. That was a really great, clear explanation of the visa bulletin. I know for many viewers, it can be very, very confusing. So thank you for giving us that explanation. And I think that for anybody who's watching now who is just deciding on embarking on this journey of coming to the United States, now is the time. There is no retrogression at this moment. As Chris said, you could be here in less than a year if you have already passed your NCLEX exam. And of course, you would need your English exam if you were not trained in English. But there really is a great opportunity right now. And I can tell you from my side specifically, we've been in international recruitment for many, many years. The demand in the US is explosive, is the word that I would probably use. And Chris and Mike, you would probably nod your heads in agreement. We really have never seen such demand for international healthcare workers ever. Well, since I've certainly been involved in this industry. So this is a great time.